This is John at Olympian Exotics. I'm just showing you guys how to do the very basics of setting up a hatchling ball python living quarters, basically. Ball pythons do not like space. They like tight, small areas that they can feel secure in. This is pretty typical of how almost all breeders have their hatchlings set up. Some use different tubs. Some have a little hide in there, but this is pretty much the basics of what is necessary. You need a water source, you need some kind of substrate. Paper towel is pretty much the easiest thing to do because you just switch it out whenever they poop in there or pee in there. And you can use a hide. A lot of the times it's completely unnecessary because this is going to be in a dark, small area. Ball pythons like dark, small areas that they can feel safe and secure in. That's what they want, is a place to feel secure in. So, big tanks are not beneficial for hatchling or even adult ball pythons because they live in burrows under the ground and they want to be left alone. They do not enjoy being handled. Doesn't mean that they won't put up with it, but they don't enjoy it, at least from my experience. Some will be a lot more less stressed out by being handled and stuff like that than others. Some will strike at you. With ball pythons, it's not that common for them to strike, really, because they're called ball pythons, so that's what they do when they're scared. They just hide out. If you handle them more, they realize that you're not a threat, and then they'll chill out for you. But you can see he's like, okay, now I'm going to see if I can get away and go find a small dark spot that's nice and warm. So, as far as temperatures go, you can do ambient, you can do back heat, you can do belly heat, but generally speaking, you want a temperature of around 85 degrees. What I do is I have a hot side at 88 degrees, and then the cool side is usually around 82. Some people have a little bit different than that, but generally speaking, you're sticking in the mid 80s. So regardless of what heat source you're using, you want to have a good thermostat, because thermostats are what helps the temperature regulate. So if you don't have a thermostat, you could be way out, or your heat source could fail and you could start a fire. Even with thermostats, you can still have fires. So this is why you want to get a good thermostat. A lot of people actually use a backup thermostat on top of the thermostat, so that way if one thermostat fails, then you have a backup that's still regulating the temperature appropriately. That's for people that actually are usually doing ambient temperatures, because obviously having two thermostats on every single rack you're using could become really expensive. One thermostat is a good thermostat is around $100, generally speaking. So I would really recommend the Herp stats. I really like those. I haven't had any issues with those. I also like the Renko stats, but those have an on-off switch, which means you set it at, say, okay, 85 degrees. When it hits 85 degrees, then you say, okay, how much range do you want it to maintain within that temperature? So you say 2 degrees, so once it hits 87 degrees, it turns off. Then when it goes down to 83 degrees, it turns back on. And then it'll go up and down consistently. Whereas the Herp stats some of them have proportional, which means, okay, it's getting close to 85 degrees, we'll power it down a little bit, so that way we're only using 20% power instead of 100%, and that'll, maybe it'll go up to 85.15 degrees, or something like that, and then it'll drop back down, because it's maintaining it, so it's using percentage-based power, so kind of like a dimmer almost. It dims it, and it's programmed through a computerized system. So those are really nice, and I like those. So if you're looking at something, I would go with the Herp stats. But any thermostat is better than no thermostat, bottom line. So if you have one ball python, you have a heat pad, you still should get at least some kind of thermostat to regulate it, because heat pads can get really hot, they can fail. I've had heat pads melt, and they can definitely do a lot of damage and potentially kill your animal if you do not have anything on there. As far as other kinds of enclosures go, generally speaking, I would not recommend them for hatchling ball pythons, because hatchling ball pythons can be picky and they can be very sensitive to changes in their environment. Sometimes they go off food for no reason at all. So you should be very careful with changing up the environment of your snake. Also, another thing, feed the snake inside of the tub. Let's say this guy is on live rat pups, girl actually, but this girl is on live rat pups. You drop a little live rat pup in there, she'll take it. You do not move her to a new enclosure because you're automatically stressing her out by moving her. If an animal that's in a predatory state is going to get scared, they're not going to want to eat because that makes them vulnerable. The only time that the snake is purely defenseless is when it's eating, so they're not going to want to eat right after they have been moved because they're automatically going to be in a state of fear. So, or at least a state of stress, if you don't want to call it fear. What else? Let's see. Trying to think. Anything else? Let's see. Some snakes will eat after being moved, but that's because they're really hungry. So, and they just don't care anymore. They're like, okay, I gotta eat something, so I'll eat. Generally speaking, it's best just to leave them alone in the enclosure. Obviously, all these different snakes have their own personalities. Some are just eat really well, and maybe they're not even really hungry or anything like that. They just have realized, okay, this is not a dangerous situation for me to be moved. But hatchlings are not that case, so I would say if you're gonna get a hatchling, just do what the breeder says. However they're feeding it, you want to replicate that environment as best as possible. So if they're doing good in the environment the breeder had, you want to aim for that environment, because the more things you change about the environment, the more stressed out the animal is going to be. So I think that's it. If you have any questions, just let me know. If you have any suggestions about future videos that I should do, let me know. If you have any questions that you want to see any cool morphs or anything like that you've seen pictures of on my page. Obviously I don't have all the morphs that exist in ball pythons, but I do have a decent number. So there you go. And actually this girl is available. This is the Lemon Blast Leopard female. If you see this video and you mention it to me, I'll go ahead and do $250 plus shipping on her. So you can see she's nice and active, not aggressive or anything like that, and she's doing really good. So there you go.